So I'm very pleased to introduce this workshop about cloud storage and about privacy by design. What is privacy by design, how it is defined, and how the, okay, Sabrina is just joining. Welcome, Sabrina. So how the privacy by design is one of the principles that have been used by the GDPR and that could be reused when you design and when you deploy an application. So we have we prepared you this short summary. So we'll have this sharing this basic, and I will also present myself and present my team. So feel free to comment, feel free to interact with us using the chat room. We also have privacy by design definition. So it's like robust. There are a lot of principles inside the principles of privacy by design. So when you want to understand privacy by design, you will have to understand what are the main principles of the regulation, privacy regulation. So mainly we will refer to GDPR. But also you will have to also understand how to develop and how to design an application, which is going to be our case study today, in order to comply with these principles. Of course, feel free to interact, feel free to comment. We will have questions raising all the presentation long, and so we will have a chance to open your mic and ask questions if you want. Feel free to do that. We are not so many, so we can interact all together. Of course, you have a Q&A at the end in order to share experiences and to share also your thoughts on the presentation. Please, Anastasia, could you mute your mic? Because I'm not sure that you're going to interact with us. Okay, so today I'm very glad to present you this presentation, and I'm with Céline Gallet. We can open its mic to introduce herself. She's the main consultant in DPO Consulting Southeast. Céline?
Yes, I'm here. So yes. I'm a data privacy specialist. I used to work with organizations like Handicap International. So we used to work on data privacy matters in relation with the GNO field. So maybe we will have a few exchange together during this presentation about specific matters that you can have in your missions.
Yes, thank you. Yes, as Céline said, we have been qualified to be the DPO for Handicap International, and also we have been in our group DPO for Doctors Without Borders, as you know, in French is Médecins Sans Frontières. And me, I'm the CEO of DPO Consulting Southeast. We are addressing all those topics, and we are based in Lyon, so not so far from GATO-NG, that is the organization of this event. I'm very pleased to work with you today. Just an introduction of who we are, and so I'm the CEO of this subsidiary. This is focused on dealing with compliance issues, and mainly GDPR, but also outsourcing of the DPO function, and a way to help organizations to deploy their audit and their compliance program on the field. So we are focused on the how to progress in the compliance and the operational different tools to be deployed, trainings, awareness programs, campaigns, and of course we developed sector expertise upon how to address specific matters, as Céline said, for the humanitarian sector or the GNO. So as you can see on this slide, we can do audits. So I don't know how to do, I don't know which data to process. Help me mapping all those data process. Doing risk analysis, which is very, very important to address risk analysis, because you're doing risk analysis all way long on your journey for the privacy, which is due to the fact that privacy is a way to protect people upon the use of their data. We're also doing compliance programs, so mainly trying to figure out how to manage, how to address these topics. It's not easy and you have a lot of data frame, legal frame, sorry, like GDPR, but you have also national laws like Loi Informatique et Liberté in French, but you have also specifics on each sector. So you have to manage to deal with all those legal aspects. You could also give advice. So if you just need us for one small advice, I don't know how to deal with this contract, I don't know how to defend my rights, I don't know how to, address specific topics, we can also do it. We're doing a lot of deliverables. That's our main job. Deliverables like data protection policies, like privacy policies, doing specific processes, templates, and so on. We're also doing some trainings dedicated to a sector, or trainings to help people become a DPO. DPO is Data Protection Officer. This is the name of our company. And also we developed a SaaS software, which is called My DPO, and which can help you deploy programs, analyze data processes, and assess risks, and also with governance KPI that could be produced in order to demonstrate. Demonstration is very strong in this GDPR regulation. So you have to demonstrate and try to put in place KPIs in order to prove the progress that you've made or not. Let me present you this case study. This case study is well, we thought about a lot of things, but we thought that COVID-19 could be pretty easy for us to share. So I'm going to read you this proposed case study. And the case study is that you are taking part into a project which is in charge of deploying healthcare workers in tracking and identify and track COVID-19 suspects or people that have been declared as COVID-19 patients. This is an IT solution. As you know, there are a lot of those applications that have been deployed in Europe, and an IT solution will be designed to register and track all potential and confirmed COVID-19 cases. And so this solution is deployed on smartphones and tablets in order to collect personal data sets, which are copied on the cloud-based server. So there are mainly an application on your phone and trying to help government, and you're in charge of developing these IT programs and putting in the field and having the issue of GDPR and making this project as GDPR friendly as it could be. So let's start with this case study in your mind, and let's go on sharing this basic definition. We will have to share these basic definitions due to the fact that it's important for you to understand what is implied by this regulation, and how you can use the GDPR as a way to better protect personal data, which is the main purpose of this regulation. And as you know, you have to think about personal data as every data that could relating to a natural person that can be identified, could be identified, or is identified. So we have three main data in this in categories of data. The main generic data, as you know, identification, contact data, name, surname, and so on. All the data that are applied by personal or professional life. You have also highly personal data, like some kind of identification, which can burden more information than an ID, like what we have in France for French people that could be online. We have the NIR, which is a social security number, which not only identify people, but also got information of the people inside the number. You've got also bank data or geo-tracking. You have also all what we are calling special category of data, which is defined by the Article 9 of the GDPR, which are all the data that really is part of the intimacy of the people. So like political beliefs, religious opinions, you have also trade union memberships, genetic data, health data, of course, biometrics, sex life, sexual orientations. And the fact is that you are not allowed to collect this data by any way, except for the exception that have been precisely defined by the GDPR. But you have also the Article 10 would be less relevant for us today, but data relating to criminal convictions, offenses, and related security data. So let's start for trying to figure out and go on you can go and speak with your mic, or you can just interact with us with the chat to know. Let's try to, if you want to design this application in order to track COVID-19 on the field, let's do, for example, in a foreign country, which kind of data you will have to use to get your service available for the public. Could you try to figure out that? And if you want to interact, I will be pleased to get your feedback. For each definition, you will be asked to participate, and I will try to access the conversation. Do you have any idea which kind of data will be needed for this application? Go ahead. If you have any idea, Benoit, Anastasia, Richard, feel free to participate. Okay.
Benoit speaking. Let's have at least one starting to
yes.
break the ice.
Thank you.
So you will have some health data, basically whether the person has or not the COVID.
Yes.
So that would be considered as a sensitive data. And then, well, I don't want to talk for everybody. Just another example will be that you would need something like a unique identifier, and to to be sure that we're talking about Benoit and not Richard having COVID.
Yeah.
And then I don't know what would be that identifier used, but it could be either a random figure or.
Benoit, we're just talking about categories. So your answer is perfectly correct. You will have, of course, two main categories to simplify the system. You will have, of course, identification number, which could be generated and of course could have security measures to better protect this kind of information. And of course, you will have a way to aggregate data coming from your COVID-19 suspicion. So all those data, and one, the fact is, each time that you see, and Linda said exactly the same, pretty good, thank you. You have this generic data and you have also sensitive data. Each time that you are thinking about sensitive data, of course, it could be also another purpose for another system. Of course, it could be more focused on sex, life, or biometrics data. But each time that you are thinking about health data, you have to think sensitive data, and you have to think specific way to address this data, which is what we're gonna now discuss. All the aspects of let me switch of data processing. Another definition, we will be going each definition each time and trying to figure out what is data processing. When you are dealing with data processing, of course, personal data processing, you have to think about any operation performed on personal data. So it's not only collecting data or registering the data that have been collected, but it could also be a way to store this data, a way to consult this data, a way to use. So as you know, on the GDPR, you have to detail all you have to do the data mapping. The main purpose of data mapping is trying to figure out all the data sets that are processing inside a system or inside an organization. So now we put some words, but of course you have many words. Each time that you access the data, each time that you modify data, even each time that you erase data, delete data, each time if you manipulate, modify, access, any kind of action on the data is a data processing. Of course, we are keeping the GDPR framework and as a way to trying to adapt to protect people. So let's now identify data processing activities that are necessary for your project. Let's go trying to figure out that. Anyone want to discuss? Let's just remember that this is an application that is used, there is some comments, that is used to track people. And how do you do that? You are using, as you know, mainly Bluetooth in order to exchange number. And by the fact that when you're going to be close by someone, both phones will exchange automatic generated numbers. And those numbers are going to be stored, but we will define this later on, stored in your iPhone or Android phone. And once you've been detected as COVID-19 patient, you will copy all your contact information and ID at aggregating all the people that you are close by during a certain period of time. And all those data are going to be copied on a cloud-based server. So just to remember what is COVID-19 application. And what said Richard said, what about anonymization and pseudonymization? Under which category would you take that? So that's a very good question. We will see anonymization later on this presentation, but first of all, let's keep focus on this differentiation. Anonymization means that you have no way to attach the data to one person. Pseudonymization, you still have a way to attach that personal data to a person, but it's going to be by a third data set or a third means. So when you read, just to reply to Richard, and after we're going to go back to the case study. And when you read the Article 25, which is defining data protection by design and by default, in this first sentence, I'm going to read it one time. It's a bit the burden, but you will see that we are referring to two means that could be used to protect personal data, which is pseudonymization and anonymization. So I'm going to read it one time. Sorry, it's a bit long. Taking into account the state of art, the cost of implementation, and the nature, scope, context, and purposes of processing, as well as the risk of varying likelihood and severity of rights and freedoms of natural person posed by the processing, the controller, we will see later on what is a controller, shall, both at the time of the determination of the needs for processing and at the time of the processing itself, implement appropriate technical and organizational measures, such as pseudonymization, you get correct, Richard, which are designed to implement data protection principles, such as data minimization in an effective manner, and to integrate the necessary safeguards into the processing in order to meet the requirements of this regulation and protect the rights of the data subjects. So even the fact to transform a personal data from a data set which identifies people to another data set which is pseudonymization, or another data set which erase any identification of a people, this is a data processing. So each time that you modify data, it's a data processing. So to go back to our case study, of course, you will have collecting. You're gonna collect personal data with your phone, even if you cannot identify directly the people, because I remember you generate ID, you deploy generated ID on each phone, you exchange ID each time they are close by using Bluetooth, and once you've been detected as a COVID patient, at this time, you're gonna upload the data to the cloud-based server in order to contact the people you have been in contact to. So you've got collecting, you've got storage, you've got, of course, use, you record data, you disclose data, and you transfer on the cloud. So you have almost all the data processing that has been displayed on this slide that applied on this project. Distribution, of course, you have distribution at the end, because in France, I don't know all the COVID-19 application, but in France, they have been decided to delete all the ID collected on the phone once every 2 weeks. We're going to go now shortly on this slide. This is maybe for us, it's you probably know this, but we have to know that the main issue here is protecting people. People are called data subjects in the GDPR. so identifiable natural person whose personal data are collected and processed. Exactly the people that are using the application. The data controller, it's very important to know this. Data controller is the organization that determines the purposes and the means of the processing of personal data. In our use case, this is a GNO that deployed this application to be close to our GONG. But of course, in France, it has been the Ministry of Health and the government that have been that decide to design this software. So you are, in this use case, you are the data controller, you're GNO that in charge of deploying this software. The other one is the processor. The processor is the one that the organization that processes data on behalf of the data controller. So the main thing in GDPR that data controller and processor have to be bound by a contract. You have joint contracts is another category when you determine jointly the purpose and means of the processing. So in fact, if you are the data controller and you are designing the software with or defining the software or designing the software with a subsidiary, with a third party, you will mainly focus on the processor aspect. The DPO is a data protection officer, the one that is in charge of informing, advising the data controller, which monitors the compliance and perform trainings of the employee. And you have the supervisory authority. In France, it's called CNIL, Commission Nationale Informatique Liberté, which is in charge of monitoring what have been done and helping data controller and processor in their privacy journey, and also that's in charge of supervising the application of the. So this is very important. And for example, let's go back to our use case. For example, for the application of COVID-19 application, the CNIL made some public recommendations and have special advice for the government in order to deploy and to keep the privacy alive on the COVID-19 application. So those are the actors and the responsibilities. Let's now focus on your job, because you are the data controller. So you decided to process data. You decided you determine the process, the purposes of the processing. So why is the data processed? You determine the means. How is the data processed? So of course, in our use case, this is the application. So this is the data controller who bears the risk of processing of the data. So GNO that want to track people, I want to track, Rohingyas, or want to track any disease, want to track COVID-19. GNO that determines the purpose and determines the means are data controller. So I just answered the question. So the data controller within my project, it's the company or the organization that is behind the development of the software. What are the main responsibilities for the data controller? Who bears the main responsibilities of the GDPR? It's maintain a record of processing activities. Make sure that data processor are GDPR compliant. So select your processor regarding also the GDPR compliance. Respect the fundamental principles of data protection, and one of the fundamental principle is, of course, privacy by design. Respect the data subject rights and provides data subject with transparent information about the way that data is processed. Transparency is a very key point for data privacy by design. Now we shared some definitions, and we are ready to go more deeply on privacy by design issue. I wrote, so I already read Article 25. Let's focus on the main idea. The main idea is to address overall compliance with the principles and obligations of the GDPR from the start of any project. If it's not from the start, it's also all the way along the project. So for each new project, for the privacy by design, which have been defined before the GDPR by Anne Cavoukian, each time that you are thinking about a new project, let's think about all the main principles of the GDPR in order to protect the right of the data subjects. And that's why you will have to define which are the data that you need, define which process to be applied, and define how to address the transparency issue. Is that to communicate to the people how do you going to process your data. And for course, it's going to be easier after if you are thinking about that as early as possible in order to optimizing GDPR compliance and of course avoid DPIA, it's in French, IAPD, DPIA when possible. DPIA is mainly a risk approach in order to reduce the risk. So of course, if you reduce the risk, the main focus of privacy by design is reducing the risk as much as possible and the earlier as possible. This is what you have to think when you are thinking about privacy by design. And the European Data Protection Board published guidelines recently that be useful, and I could share the link to the guidelines. And it is explaining the data privacy by design as this is therefore essential that controllers take this responsibility seriously and implement the GDPR obligation when designing processing operations. And later on the executive summary said, to be able to implement the requirements of the privacy by design, privacy by default, it's crucial that the controller understands the data protection principles and the data subject's rights and freedoms. That's why we're going to go deeper on what are the main principles of this data by design. We're going to go deeper on each principle and try to figure out how those principles can be respected for our use case. The first one is specified, explicit, and legitimate purposes. The second one is lawfulness, fairness, and transparency. The third is very important, of course, also for the performance of the application, adequate, relevant, and limited data. So you have the whole process of data minimization that is behind, of course, every process that is collecting personal data. Accurate data, kept to date if necessary. Limited data storage. We are not thinking about how to limit data storage when you start a project. That is very important to forecast the way how you're gonna erase data. So think about for now as the period you need to store the data. Of course, in the COVID-19, it's in regard of the medical expertise that you got. Security and confidentiality, of the data. This is very important to figure out what are the main security topics to be addressed. And the seventh is respect of data subject rights. That is something that is more commonly understood, data subject rights. So we're going to finish with that. I guess you're ready. The first principle is to collect data for specific purpose. So as we decided, we all already decided what is the purpose of our application, and the purpose has to be specified. So you have to write it down, explicit and legitimate. You have to think about this before you process, before the processing starts. So make sure to avoid purpose diversion. The purpose diversion is, as you say, oh, we should reuse this data for another purpose. No, this is forbidden. So your part now, let's identify the purpose of the data processing in this project. Maybe Sabrina, Richard, Mark, go ahead. You could also use the conversation online. So go ahead, try to think prevention of the spread of the virus. Yes, this is the main purpose, but you have to be, Richard, more specific, because remember, each purpose, and you will see that later on. This is the main problem that you are addressing, prevention of the spread of the virus. But we will try to figure out specific purposes, so much more in detail. Because after that, we will try to match each purpose for each legal basis, and how you're gonna explain to the people what are the purpose of the data that you are collecting. So, for example, a prevention of maybe mentioning the region. Yes, you can mention the region. If you are addressing a specific region, you have to be as precise, as transparent as possible. I'm gonna help you. We've done this exercise with Céline and Glynis this morning, and we were just writing down some purposes that could be applied to this system. Is first, inform potentially contaminated persons. It could be to help direct patients or person to the right testing facilities. So having suspicions of COVID-19 and help people go test themselves. It could be also in this main as Richard said, in main purpose to prevention of the spread of the virus. It could be also anonymous statistics, the mainly that you are seeing in the news. And of course, also produce medical information, because as you know, if you know on each region how is the spread, how many deaths you have, of course, you can adapt also your prevention disposal. Okay, thank you, Richard, for your help, and Sabrina also. The second one is lawfulness, fairness, and transparency. So this is the main. For that, of course, you have to be lawful. So fairness, of course, is also very important. But when you are thinking about lawfulness, you have to think about 6, and this is really the basis of GDPR, 6 legal bases that you have the right to use to process personal data. The first one is performance of a contract. You have a contract with someone, you need this address, you need a lot of information to produce this contract. Performance of a contract is this first legal basis. Consent of the data subject, that's what you know in the marketing and when you want to receive a newsletter, you are giving your consent as a data subject. That's also the legal basis that is used mainly to put cookies on your laptop when you are reading news on the web. Compliance with legal obligation. So you have an obligation to, I don't know, for accountability or for your business, you have legal obligations to track your employees. You also have protections of the vital interest of the data subject. That could be a legal basis interesting for us. You have pursuit of the controller's legitimate interest. So, of course, this is not the strongest legal basis, but you can demonstrate a legitimate interest in order to collect and process data, personal data. But you have also public interest. So let's guess what could be for each purpose, like for example, to inform, to direct person to the right testing facilities, to get anonymous statistic or to produce medical information. Let's keep what could be for the GNO that is developing this application, the legal basis that could be used. I'm going to give you help. For the French application, the legal basis that have been used is public interest. Now, the public interest has been used for all the purpose of the application. But if you don't have, most case consent, yes, but consent has constraints. It means that you have to demonstrate how do you get to consent, and you have to help people get back their consent as easy as they give you the consent. So this is, if you can avoid consent as much as you can. It is application to NGO. I mean, NGO can use public interest when they are not public body. They could, but without public authorizations or public sponsorship, thank you, Benoit, we could also use vital interest. Of course, this is a vital, let's go back on the slide. Projections of the vital interest of the data subject. It could be a vital interest, helping the data subjects knowing if they got the burden of the COVID-19, because as you know, some people have no symptoms when they got the COVID-19. So it could be in their vital interest to protect their relatives, to avoid doing, I don't know, transportations or keeping special precautions in order to avoid spreading the disease. So just to keep in mind, if there is a public authorization, maybe we could go for the public interest. If we have no public authorization, maybe we could go for the vital interest. I mean, each time to do this job, to do this exercise, it's going to help you also on the transparency, because on your policy, you will explain all that. Who's the data controller, who's the data processor, if there is one, whose purpose of the data processing, and which legal basis you are using. This is very important for the legal aspect, but also to communicate with the people that could be applied. But to go further on the consent, if you want to use, as Richard proposed, the consent is precisely defined in the GDPR. You have to be, time is going on, freely given, unambiguous, means that you have no doubt what is the data subject intent. That's why you have to define the purposes. That's why you have to provide legal basis. That's why you have to provide good, accurate data, accurate information. that to be specific. That's why you have to tick on different, for each time you have your consent. Let's think about the cookies. It's an easier way to analyze what is specific. So you could, for example, give your consent to one process and not another one. You have to be informed. So the consent has to be explicit. Which data are collected and processed on the legal ground of consent within my project? How can I get lawful consent of the data subject within my project? So this is really on the transparency issue, this question. We don't have any. The consent is not so important, but we wanted to focus on this because maybe when you're going to design application or when you're going to do privacy by design, you will have to focus on this consent. I think that time is going on, so I'm gonna go faster now. So you will keep this slide, so we're gonna publish it right away after our workshop. Let's keep in mind that for the consent, you have to offer a simple way to withdraw his or her consent, ensure that the consent is properly taken in account by the data controller and data processor. So if you have different data processor or if you exchange data with a third party, you have to make sure that if the data subject withdraws his or her consent, is going to be taken in account and keep proof of the consent. That's why it's not if you can avoid using consent, go ahead, avoid using consent. Let's move on. Let's go back to sensitive data. So remember that medical data is sensitive data. It's prohibited by definition, and there are exceptions. Explicit content. So if you are using medical data, you have to much more be detailed on the way you explain how it is managed. How do you process data? For it is there are exceptions, of course, with the protection of the vital interest of the data subject. That's our use case. A process necessary for the purpose of preventing and occupational medicine and processing necessary for public interest. I am allowed to process this data. So I guess that if you agree to use not using the consent and based on public interest, you will be allowed to collect this sensitive data. So you have to write it down. When we are doing a project on the privacy by design aspects with Céline, which would be maybe she will have time to explain that better than me. We will have a lot of questions that are raising, and we are writing down every argumentation or each time that we decide to use a legal basis and not using another one. We are just writing down how we imagine the system and what are the arbitration that we are doing. Fairness and transparency. So this is very important, and this is very a thing which the authorities are controlling, and that's also why Google have been fined in France. It's you have to make the information understandable. That's why you have to have clear, concise, enabling data subject to understand, and if necessary, make use of their rights. So you have to, this is going to be one key issue for you as a GNO to deploy this application in order to use the language of the persons, analyze the level of person comprehension. So you have to analyze to which you're gonna discuss with. If you are illiterate persons, of course you have to provide all explanations. So the information has to be readable and easily accessible. So if you have blind people, you have to make sure that they also have the information going through. So this is really an exercise to focus on the persons, be as a persons, and trying to figure out what are the information that have been that have to be provided. So this is really the thing that you have to keep in mind. Think about the targeted audience. Think about their ability to understand what you are talking. It's not, of course, if you are focusing on children, you have to use words that are understandable by the children. If you are focusing on the kind of person that are, I don't know, not have no way to understand, you have to use the words that are easily understandable by the people. But what you can do also is having a summary, very short, and after that go deeper on each protocol or each purposes, or you redirect to the privacy policy for much more detail. So information to be provided, of course, identity and contact data of the controller, purposes, legal basis, we discussed already, recipients, storage period, contact info of the DPO, easy way to get in touch with the DPO. The rights of the data subject, so you mainly know those rights, access, erase, and so on. And the right to file a complaint. So give, for example, in France, you give a way to address the CNIL. Depending on the case, legitimate instrument pursued by the controller, existence of an automated decision making, which is including profiling, we could be used as our use case. The fact that provision of personal data is a statutory or contractual requirement, and the fact that the controller intends to transfer personal data to a third country. So you really have to explain how do you transfer data if you are transferring data, of course, outside the European Union, which on a country that does not offer a same level of protection as the European Union. This is transparency. Transparency, lawfulness, and fairness. This is very key. Data minimization, as we discussed already under Article 25, mentioning the data minimization as a way, as a mean to protect and to be very useful on data privacy by design. Data processes are adequate, relevant, and limited. The fact is that you have to limit as much as possible the data that you are collecting in order to fulfill the purpose of the data collection. So adequate, sufficient to achieve the intended purpose. There is one question. No? You have another 30 minutes. Yes. We're gonna go faster now. Relevant and limited. So no data, let's keep in mind, no data collection just in case you could be reused on another purpose. No, you don't have the right to collect data with a purpose that you did not imagine from the start, that data protection by design. What data do I really need? How I make clear distinction between mandatory and optional data? Do I collect, there is some problem. Do I collect objective data? Will I be able to complete some privacy, etc., etc.? You have to answer this question. Pick one data processing purpose in this project and list the categories of data that have to be necessarily collected and processed. Pretty easy. Anyone want to do this easy job? You already mentioned it. So this is contact information, for example, name, surname, address, and could be also contact information on specific countries. Could be I don't know, a community, a geolocalization. It depends on the country you are addressing. It depends on the person that you are collecting data from. So of course, for tracking people, you have to identify people. That's why we are generating automatically generated numbers, and we are linking those numbers to contact information right after the person has been detected as a COVID-19 patient. Implementation of legal, technical, and accurate data. Accurate data is as important as the others. It's very important to have the right information. And for example, in our COVID-19 application, this is very important not to track the right person and to make sure that is the right person that have been detected as COVID-19. So the definition is to ensure that personal data that are inaccurate, having regard to the purpose for which they are processed, are erased and rectified without delay. This is also a very important thing, the accurate data. So you have to think about the protocol to make sure that the data is correct and to make sure to be able to correct it without delay if you are in front of wrong data in your database. So data quality, of course, helps you to perform your purposes. Let's move on. We have also, we still have three main principles, and after we end with this, and have, I hope, enough time to discuss at the end of this use case. Personal data, sorry, have to maybe stored for no longer than necessary. So think about the way to erase, think about the consequences, think about how to archive the purpose, the data if it's in the public interest. So determine the conversation period before you design your application or your software. And of course, if you are properly design your application, you will be sure to have no consequence and no discrepancy on the data that you erased. So now we have to a few questions for you. What impact will the subject storage periods of personal data have on my project? What question should I ask myself? How do I take the regulations into account? If someone wanna answer those questions, and after we're gonna be almost done. No. Well, let's move on. So think about how long it is important to track data. Remember, 15 days have been useful to go back to all the person that you are in contact with, and think about how COVID-19, of course. As you know, the COVID-19, you can be you can have the COVID-19 and not knowing it during a certain period of time. So you don't have the right to collect data and store this data as too long. On which period do you choose the retention period? Very good question, Benoit. The retention period is depending of multiple aspects. The first one is how long you need this data to process and to be useful. But you also have constraints depending of legal aspects. So, for example, how long do you keep a work contract is depending on of course the possible fine or the possible control that you can have in your organization. So let me answer you because it has been quietly well explained in the, give me a second, in the guidelines, but mainly is not keeping the data too long. In the guideline, they said the controller must ensure that personal data is kept in a form which permits identification of data subject for no longer than is necessary for the purpose for which the personal data is processed. It's vital that the controller knows exactly what personal data the company processes and why. The purpose of the processing shall be the main criterion to decide in how long personal data shall be stored. So you have to think about, of course, the justification, enforcement of retention policies. You have to think about automation of the deletion of personal data. So it really depends on all the legal aspects. Because, for example, you will have to keep, I don't know, if you have an employee, you have to keep some data of your employee during a certain period of time. So what we are doing on our daily job is helping have a referential on everything that have been collected, how long you have to keep it. Let's move on. Security and confidentiality of the data is very important to address this as when you are designing a new software, and of course to think about the security as a whole. If you are designing an application on your iPhone or your Android phone, of course you will have to make sure that you have the right level of security on your device, but also on the server, also on the transfer, also on your backup and your logs. You have to think about disaster recovery, data access, and user rights. You have to think about, if you are on a cloud-based server, how your processor, which is going to be the company that is proposing you cloud-based server, is demonstrates its ability to comply with the GDPR. If I don't know, requires us to keep personal data of a project for 7 years, that this count as use of the data to keep personal data after the project. Alors, so first of all, if you are their processor, if the donor, for example, I don't know how do you mean donor, but if the donor is data controller and he asks you to keep the data during 7 years, you have to make sure why they are mentioning 7 years. Maybe there are legal aspects, but you have to also alert them that maybe this retention period is too long. Maybe you could also provide the right information with anonymization. Maybe it's not the best way not to keep the burden of the regulation aspects is, of course, to anonymize data. So if you anonymize data, you cannot, it's no more personal data. So maybe you could produce KPI if it's what your donor is asking you for, and it will be okay. So you have to challenge each time that someone is asking you to keep data for too long. You have to challenge this assumption. But it really depends on what is the purpose, what is the legal basis, and what is the legal framework in the country in which this is taking place. The GDPR is above all. It's just giving you the big rules, and after you have to use the rules of each country. For example, in France, you have to keep your salary sheets for 5 years. That's done. After 5 years, you don't need it anymore. But think about the security as a necessary safeguard and keep the storage limitation as possible. Of course, the point of vigilance, I'm going to do it because we don't have so much time. Sorry, as you see, it's very big privacy by design. We could do that for almost a day long. I think that for the vigilance, it's the way you encrypt data, the way you store it in the cell phone, the way you transfer data to the cloud server, and the way you match different automatically generated number, encrypt automatically generated number, and as you match in order to know that I've been close by someone who's a COVID-19 patient. So this is really the very highly high importance points of vigilance for this this project. Principles to check: access, rectification, erasure, restriction, portability. We don't have much time to discuss that. You also have to inform people of their right, access, rectification, as I said, and we also provide you with a checklist that you can reuse, identify data processing situation, identify the purpose, legal basis, data subject, necessary data, storage period. And this is what you have to keep in mind. Even if it's not perfect, just keep in mind, keep this. You also can download this, the guidelines, DPB proposed. I'm going to send you on the chat the link to keep it that. This is mainly examples and a better way to understand what is privacy by design. Sorry, it has been quite fast, but there's broad implications of privacy by design on the COVID-19, and of course, there are a lot of press around COVID-19. I propose that to have quickly Q&A. If you have any question, maybe Céline or Glynis could answer. I'm going to go back on other questions that could have been raised. So are we answered the retention period? It's 44. We're almost done. If you have any question, I'm going to send you right away the link for the guidelines. Let me check if there are more questions. When we consider the complexity of the privacy by design, should the NGO still engage in technical innovation? Privacy by design is just a way to compile all the GDPR principles. It's just a way to address all the principles. Of course, you have to take time before you start your jobs, before you start to design any project, any new application. You have to take time to address all those issues, the 7 principles that we discussed all together. But the time that you spend on these pre-steps, this pre-design of your applications, it's time, of course, that you're going to gain at the end. That you will design perfectly your application in order to be totally compliant from the start. That's the main purpose of the privacy by design. Can privacy by design, thank you, Mark, be implemented at the organization level rather than the project level? No. It's mainly privacy by design for project. It could be application, but it could be also a new activity. It could be a website. It could be everything. So there is no privacy by design at the organizational level, but your privacy by design will be a part of your organization level GDPR compliance. So it's a way to demonstrate your ability to keep in mind the privacy main principles that once again have been defined before the GDPR by Anne Cavoukian. So it's also a subject that have to be addressed with the DPO. The DPO, if you have a DPO, if you don't have, you can of course ask for a company like us to help you with these topics. But of course, you have to combine the technical aspects, the regulatory and the compliance aspects all together. So go to your CISO, go to your DPO, and ask them to help you with these topics. How do you operationalize data subjects' ability to invoke the right to be forgotten when collecting data from population that are transient or maybe otherwise face barriers to contacting the data controller? Thank you, Sabrina, for this tricky question. Of course, that's why you have to address design and focus on the way to protect people. And of course, if you are a refugee in the camp population, you should have a way to easily contact someone in your organization. It could be a privacy champion, the privacy correspondent, someone in charge of this subject inside the camp. I know that there is a big gap between what we could imagine, what are the principles, and in the field, what are the activities. Maybe Céline could explain you much better than me what we are doing with MSF, what we are doing with Handicap International, because we are really focusing on using all those tools, and privacy by design is one of those tools in order to progress on the field. Because as Knil said, it's in concrete, the evaluation of the ability for you and for your project and for your organization to deploy these compliance issues, but to make sure that compliance issues are properly addressed. It's in concreto. In concreto means depending on your ability to do that, your finance, your human resources, the people that you are addressing. So, of course, if you are a big company with a lot of means and a lot of financial power, you will be much more controlled, and in concreto, it will be much harder for you to explain that you could not do that. Of course, if you have limited resources and you have very hard constraints, maybe you could do small steps. You could inform the people by using papers, by using I don't know, speech, by using any means that you. The GDPR does not precise how you can do it. It depends in concreto what you can do. Any more question? It's 50. Richard got let's take the last one. When selecting a turnkey data collection tool, to what extent are we obliged to stick to privacy by design? We wouldn't have an influence on the capabilities of the tool. Are the minimum requirements of the tool must meet? So if this is a very good question. If you are the controller, the one that decides to define the purposes and define the needs, and you are using a tool, first of all, you will have to select the tool. So you will have to demonstrate that you are asked, and that you evaluated the ability of your processor, the one that produce the tool that you are using, to comply with the GDPR. So this is your responsibility to ask if their policy is there a compliance program, how do the people are trained, if there are any DPO and so on. And if you are if you analyze this some kind of tricky issue about, it depends on the tool, depends on the purposes, it depends on the people, it depends a lot of issues, but to keep in mind that you have to select, evaluate, and track what is the data collection tool that is proposed to you. So there is no answer, but of course you have to be proactive on this issue and not avoiding to put this privacy issue too hard, too difficult, and put it on away from you. And minimal requirements to the tool. Yes, minimal requirements is to comply with the law. To comply with the law, to comply with the GDPR also. Let's finish with that. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. Thank you. Sorry to have not as much time as I wanted to make sure that we could discuss all this. I'm just sending you or you can Google it. A DPB guidelines on privacy. It's been adopted end of October this year, so this is very fresh. And really thank you once again. Thank you, Celine. Thank you, Glynis, for this presentation and for the preparation. Thank you for GONG for making us possible to discuss this topic today all together. I don't know how to stop the Zoom. Thank you. Have a good day. I'm gonna stop this. We prepared all those things. Feel free to contact me on the chat. Feel free to contact me directly. You will find me on the attendees. Feel free to call me or to contact me by email. And have a very good day. Have a good GONG this year. My best. Bye bye.